The first one we're going to talk about tonight is underreporting. And like I touched on a minute ago, simple stuff when it comes to our nutrition tracking, but this is a really common mistake. And over the years, this has definitely come up a lot when we're kind of doing nutrition coaching sessions, trying to kind of, if things maybe aren't going quite to plan, what are the potential reasons that are stopping that? And even though it seems obvious now when we talk about it, it's not always obvious at the time to people or to everyone. So it makes for a good topic just to make sure we're covering all bases. So with the content, this part of the webinar, really the main objective is, and I touched on it last week, was that referring back to that penny jar metaphor, where when it comes to tracking, we're using that metaphor where it's almost like counting pennies into a penny jar. At that particular moment in time, those pennies don't really, they don't really seem like much as you put them in the jar. But over the course of an extended period of time, say 12 months, you build up, a nice healthy amount of pennies in that penny jar. And it's the same with your nutrition. If you're tracking things, what this is about is making sure if you're tracking things, let's make sure we add up those pennies and we take consideration those pennies. And I'll give you an example of those pennies shortly, but there might be something like that odd sweet that you have that turned into 2, that turned into 3, that turned into 4, that turned into 5 in the office, and it's little things like that, which is what we're talking about here, but they all add up. So it's just a brief reminder on making sure that when you're tracking, you're trying to be as consistent as you can. And this is a really common statement that we get as well. And I'm trying to, put things on these slides here that maybe some of you will, might recognize that you said it to yourself. But this, is a really common statement that people say, I don't eat that much. But really, like studies have, it's out there, studies have shown, and there's lots of good quality studies as well, that people tend to unknowingly underreport that calorie intake. And that's not really because they're trying to maybe deceive themselves, although sometimes it can be like we're trying to sort of shy away from the truth. Let's be honest with ourselves. I think we all probably do that in some areas of our lives, but obviously at the moment we're talking about tracking. So it's one, we're not making sure we're not doing that. But at the same time, what this is also about is preventing anyone feeling frustrated, if they are tracking, but they're not quite counting all those pennies. That can lead to a feeling of frustration because they're feeling like they're doing, in their mind, everything. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty, maybe there's a few things that they're missing. And if I'm being honest, I've had conversations with people before about this whole topic of underreporting. We've gone back through their MyFitnessPal to add up all those extra calories. And I've worked with some people before where it's, it's hundreds of calories that they've not accounted for, which certainly makes a difference between, achieving some good quality fat loss results and not achieving some fat loss results. So like I touched on the last couple of weeks, if you've decided to take that time and energy and you kind of refer back to that ball leg scale and you're thinking, I am going to do something like MyFitnessPal, let's do it properly. Let's get involved with the penny jar and making sure we're on top of that. So here, the graph that you can see on the screen, on the left-hand side, we've got what I think I'm eating, and then we've got what I'm actually eating. So the dotted line here might represent that someone's calorie intake, based off maybe MyFitnessPal or something, is they need to eat about 2,500 calories a day for numbers' sake. And then what they're actually eating, and that white graph there demonstrates they're having 2,000 calories a day. And then on the right side here, we've got what I'm actually eating, and then they're having their 2,000 calories a day, but then they're having that peanut butter on toast or on crumpets, and they're not accounting for that extra large sort of knife going into the peanut butter. Then they're having those sweets, that from 1, 2, 3 or 4 or 5 sweets in the office that I mentioned a minute ago. And as you can see, the bar's going up here, this white bar's increasing, it's increasing. And then they're not accounting for maybe all that sauce that they put over their particular food that evening. And then finally, what they didn't account for was that frappuccino or that coffee or that milk or that extra bit of wine. And we end up in that position where we've actually gone from a calorie deficit on plan to actually into a calorie surplus, sort of unknowingly and without realizing, just because, you know, we're not really sort of taking the time and attention to, you know, count those pennies and keep on top of that. And it's a really, really easy mistake to make. But like I said at the start of this, it's one that's worth pointing out, one that's worth having a conversation on, because it's one that's worth keeping an eye out and trying to prevent that from happening. So what you thought, you know, was actually a calorie deficit actually turned out to be a calorie surplus. And like I said, it's an easy mistake to make. But what happens is, you know, it results in that no progress. And then it results in, like I said before, feelings of frustration. It results in someone potentially giving up, where, like I said on week 1, I really believe that when you're first starting out, when it comes to your nutrition, if you've taken that time, decided that you want to focus on your nutrition, you know, we know that taking control of our nutrition and having that sort of mindset shift of not worrying too much about what you're eating, so having to have that perfect diet, but moving from a mindset shift of what I'm eating to how much I'm eating, I really believe that that's the way forward for a lot of people. And yet, if they don't quite count their pennies, or they're not quite got their tracking, you know, nailed down just yet, it can almost lead them to think, you know, screw it, I'll try something else. Where I passionately believe that this is a good starting point for people, because it gets people in the right mindset and taking full control over their diet. So from there, I wanted to be able to play this video too, but what I've done instead, it wouldn't let me play just with Zoom and YouTube linking up. It was almost slowing the computer down a little bit. So what I've done here, and I'll put it into the Facebook group, but it's only a 3.5-minute video, but it's a snippet taken from a BBC documentary a couple of years ago. And the woman in this particular documentary, you know, she was, again, unknowingly, but she'd almost thought that she had a slow metabolism. And again, I've heard things like that before, or other things before. You know, and maybe a common one might be, it could be hormones, or it could be a particular stage in my life where, even like things like menopausal and stuff. And what I'm not here saying is like, it's not that someone might be menopausal, and it's not that it might be their hormones. It well and truly, maybe their sort of fat loss results, or their fat loss goals might be slowed down. They could be well and truly slowed down by that sort of stuff. But at the same time, yes, that might be the case. At the same time, that doesn't mean to say you can't take full control over the things that you can control. Do you know what I mean? Like we some areas of our life maybe we can't control. We get to that point in our life. However, we can control what we do about our nutrition. We can control our training routines, and we can control things like our sleep routines, which have a massive impact. And in this particular case, like I said before, the woman was talking about, feeling like she had a slow metabolism. And she was coming out with statements like this, such as nothing works. But as you will see on the 3.5-minute video, if you choose to watch it, you know, she was reporting that she was having roughly 1,100 calories a day. Now, that's obviously a low amount. And then as it goes through the clip, it came out that when she started actually reporting things and getting on top of her pennies or her calories, that she was actually consuming well over 3,000 calories a day. And that's obviously an exaggerated example. You know, she's reporting 1,100 calories and actually in 3,000 calories. However, but the point being is, one, if you're going to do it, get on top of it. Let's do it properly, and let's establish some healthy routines within our daily lives where we're on top of our pennies, we're on top of our calories. And then number two, if that was the case, well, at least there's now something that particular woman can go away and do about it. You know, she's not in a position where she's got a slow metabolism. She's in a position where she can take control. Like I said a minute ago, yes, there may be other things in our lives that might slow down fat loss or whatever. However, there's certainly things that we can do about it. So coming back to that point of trying to, as best as you can, you know, it doesn't have to be 100%. And I think I gave the example, when was it, last week, of a particular member where she was in a nutrition coaching session with me, and she's like, Jack, I went out on Friday night. I was like, right, that's cool, no worries, but you've not put any, you know, you've not tracked anything. And she's like, yeah, well, I had 12 porn star martinis. And I was like, well, one, how do you feel about having 12 porn star martinis? And two, you know, let's just put something in the MyFitnessPal or in your tracking, just so it's more about keeping the discipline of keeping on top of that habit. And it comes back to that third rule that we spoke about in week 1 of these webinars. Those 3 rules, if you remember. Rule 1 was being, you know, trying to have 80% of your nutrition from sort of single ingredient foods or sort of foods that you're making yourself. Rule 2 was being 20% having that flexibility. You know, we're all humans. We all run off emotions and whatever else. We're not robots. So you've got to have keep those indulgent foods into your diet. That's a good, healthy nutrition plan. But rule 3 was to make sure, you know, if you're tracking, that we want to be as accurate as possible, you know, and we want to make sure we're eating the right amount of food, however much that might be, for our, you know, individual lifestyles and goals moving forward, to allow you to sort of regain some control. So I think that kind of puts that point to bed. Touching on last week, that was just what I mentioned a minute ago about the whole mindset shift. I think it's good to reiterate that point, that whilst we're starting out, it's, you know, using that trace and paper metaphor, use MyFitnessPal as your director to guide you and almost sort of put you in a good space. Instead of worrying too much about what you're eating, let's get right about how much you're eating. But just to sort of close off that point about reporting and making sure we're not under-reporting, I saw this quote this week, actually. I think it was on one of our blogs, actually, on our that Patrick would have written or wrote on our website. Anyway, it was, what you measure, you manage. What you manage will motivate you. Okay, so obviously we're measuring, you know, or tracking our energy intake via use of the MyFitnessPal, and that's obviously the MyFitnessPal is allowing us to manage that. But because we're managing things and we're taking control, we can see, you know, where we might be going wrong or where we're going right, and that motivates us. So I think that's an important point for anywhere in your life. And I saw it on one of our blog posts, and I thought, oh, I like that. I'll put that into the this week's webinar. So what you measure, you manage. What you manage will motivate you. And like I said, it goes across all areas of your life. If you're taking control of as much as possible, and that way you're managing it properly. And at least then, if you're managing it properly, you've got the, you know, me, Mike, and Patrick as sort of, you can use us to bounce questions off or do these webinars and make sure that you're kind of on the right track. All right. So hopefully that makes sense with under-reporting. So next, we're going to look at NEAT and how it can benefit your fat loss goals. And again, guys, this isn't like rocket science stuff. It's basic stuff that we probably all know, but the same with under-reporting. It's nice to have that reminder. If you're doing it already, it's nice to kind of be reassured that you're on the right tracks. And it's just essentially another tool that you can, if you feel like you're in got the right headspace for it, that you could potentially use to you know, aid your fat loss and keep pursuing on those goals. So what does we'll come to that in a minute. First of all, the objectives. So we're going to actually look at what NEAT is. Some of you guys may or not know. Like I said, it's a quite a common topic within the fitness industry, then how you can implement it. And it can be essentially what it stands for is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So what a fancy name that is. And really what it is referring to is basically it's any calories that you burn from unplanned exercise. Okay, and it's also a fairly relevant topic because a lot of us have now changed our day-to-day routines because of the restrictions that we're living under. So a lot of us are actually moving less now because maybe we're working from home. So therefore, we're not getting walking to the train or walking into work or walking around the office. A lot of us at the moment are maybe working from home, stuck in your room most of the day, not getting out, not doing a lot of movement. So this is definitely a worthwhile topic. And to give you an example on like some forms of NEAT, it could be things like, even just things like fidgeting or standing, doing the washing up, doing some gardening, walking to the shops or walking to the car, like anything that is goes any sort of calorific burn or energy expenditure that doesn't take in the form of like booking a Zoom session or booking a workout or going out for a run, and this little table here, take it with a pinch of salt, but it has been studied, and it's been studied quite a lot, like the calories that we could burn just from things such as like resting or sitting motionless, which is obviously not a lot per hour, compared to maybe going for a walk at different paces. And you can see there, obviously, the calories increase as we know, like the more we move, it's not rocket science. But it is maybe nice to know for those of you who do spend a lot of time sitting down per day, maybe one thing you can take away from this discussion would be to try and add in some extra movement throughout the day, even if that means standing a little bit more or taking regular intervals throughout the day to, walk around the garden or walk downstairs or do a workout or, something like that. So really what we're talking about here is expending more calories or expending more energy around our training. And therefore, obviously, the more activity that we do, the higher NEAT, or therefore the higher amount of calories that we burn that isn't in the form of, structured exercise. So that means two things, really. So therefore, if you have a higher NEAT, your more calories needed to maintain your body weight. So therefore, that's a benefit of us if our goals are a fat loss goals. So if we're burning more calories throughout the day, just from doing day-to-day things, then obviously it's going to put us in that calorie deficit. Or let's say, for example, you didn't want to massively lower your calorie intake through your nutrition or whatnot, but you had the maybe the time and the energy to do more exercise. Well, then it would be another way of achieving a calorie deficit, not just through having to look at your nutrition or get yourself in a calorie deficit through using something like MyFitnessPal. So let's talk through it a little bit, put it onto some graphs and give you some visuals for the visual learners in here. So let's say, for example, in this particular case, the dotted line here across the screen represents baseline calories to maintain my body weight. So you can see here it's like 2,000 calories, times that by 7 days a week, and we're looking at around 14,000 calories throughout the week. All right, so if I eat 2,000 calories, represented here with the white graphs, and obviously if I need 2,000 calories, then I'm going to maintain my body weight. So calories in, match calories out, therefore weight stays the same. So that's essentially what happens if someone's body weight isn't changing each week. They've got a goal of fat loss, but they're the weight's not coming down, the body fat's not coming down. This is essentially what's going on. It's like you're eating and almost like expending the same amount of calories. So calories in match calories out, so therefore your weight stays the same. However, let's say, for example, in this particular case, I decided, right, what I'm going to do is I know my baseline calories. This is about 2,000 calories a day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that by about 500 a day. So I have about 1,500 calories over the course of the week, therefore creating that 500 calorie deficit. And as you can see there at the bottom, having like a weekly requirement of around 14,000 calories, but I'm actually only eating 10.5. Therefore, I've created that calorie deficit. Or what I could do is I could increase my expenditure. So having my 2,000 calories a day, but therefore I increase my expenditure. So therefore, as you can see, it's like here at the bottom, if I increase my expenditure, I would therefore need to higher my calorie requirement if I wanted to maintain weight. But obviously, if the goal is fat loss and you're expending a lot of calories, but you're eating 2,000 calories, you're obviously still maintaining that calorie deficit. And if, of course, is a little bit of a science for you, let's say, for example, you're in a calorie deficit of 3,500 calories. That is what it takes to lose 1 pound of fat. So if anybody is losing like 1 pound of fat per week, that means you must be in a rough calorie deficit of around 3,500 calories across the week, or broken down day by day, about a 500 calorie deficit a day. Or we go back here, so we're having 2,000 calories a day, but this time what I do is I lower my calorie intake slightly. As you can see here at the bottom, instead of going down to 10,500 calories across the week, it's at 12.2. So I've only slightly reduced my calorie intake. However, I also increase my energy output, and this is what a lot of people, the tactic most people tend to do. So what we're doing here is we're kind of dieting or reducing our energy intake through maybe using your MyFitnessPal. And then what we're also doing is, let's take you guys, for example, I'm doing some Zoom sessions. So I'm also expending some energy that way. And that way, that's how I'm creating my energy deficit this time. And again, there, as you can see, there is an example. It works out exactly the same. If you reduce your calories slightly, but you're increasing your energy output, that's a way of getting that energy deficit. And in this case, we see it again, 3,500 calories, or equals to about 1 pound of body fat. So they're kind of like your three options when it comes to your nutrition and dieting. It's reducing your calorie intake to create that deficit, or you can sort of keep your calorie intake the same, however, increase your energy output, so you're doing more, and that's where obviously things like meat and stuff can come in, or you can do a hybrid of the both. So when it comes to sort of upping your needs or upping your essentially your energy expenditure, which isn't any form of structured exercise, so it's exercise out the gym, it certainly requires some conscious effort. So if it's an option that you decide to look at, or an avenue you decide to go down, it's again planning something into the diary. But what I would do is I wouldn't worry too much about the calories and stuff that you burn in the gym. And that can sometimes be a common question: how many calories do I burn on, I don't know, a PT session or a Zoom session, for example? Try to focus on what you're doing outside of the gym, and that way you're taking sort of control on that NEAT. And a good place to start, and I know a lot of you guys are sort of taking this approach already, would be to look at your step count. So you could increase your daily step count. So where I would go with it, or a little bit of advice for you, if you want to take sort of one action away from tonight to increase that NEAT or increase that energy expenditure alongside doing your MyFitnessPal, is just to first of all start, see where you're at initially. These days, I know a few of you guys wear like the Fitbits and the Apple Watches and stuff. Those devices obviously measure your step count, but also your phone does as well. The only problem is with your phone, if it's not always in your pocket, it's not going to be a great as a pedometer. But what you could buy is off Amazon is a cheap little pedometer, and just strap it to your to the top of your trousers, and that way you can measure your step count if you don't have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or something. And that would be a good place to start. And sort of going for a walk to work. These are simple strategies. Parking further away, so you're increasing your step count. Going for walking your breaks, walking to meetings, or where possible at the moment, having active weekends. I know a few of the members at the moment alongside your training. You know, there's some members, I'm sure Trisha won't mind me saying, I know you're on the call, but you know, Trisha's going out and she's measuring and she's tracking her weekly steps, and she's getting about 25k a week in. And that's not need to say that everyone needs to go away and do that, but what Trisha's doing a good job of is she's doing exactly what we're talking about here. You know, she's keeping an eye on her nutrition, and then she's also decided, right, well, where can I start to look at NEAT or my exercise? Where can I fit in more time to do some walking or increase my steps? And that's a good place to start. Like I said, you need something to track your steps. But if that's an option that you want to look at, looking at your NEAT, seeing where you can expend some more calories day to day, it's certainly a simple trick to look at. But in the end, it's just another tool in your toolbox of different ways of creating that energy deficit. You know, and if you're in a position at the moment where you're happy with your nutrition in your MyFitnessPal and you just want to focus on that, that's totally fine. Or if on the flip side of that, you're feeling happy with just doing the, you've got some structured exercises and you're doing some Zoom sessions or you're doing some Zumba stuff or whatnot, you're using YouTube, that's perfectly fine. But this is just another idea, you know, some of you guys to think about. Go away and have a think, you know, where can you start to get more energy expenditure through your days, especially now as we're a little bit more restricted, and if you're working from home and you're moving less. So it's just another idea to think about. So there are two topics tonight, underreporting done, and NEAT. So hopefully that all makes sense. Any questions? As normal, please feel free to comment back in the Facebook group or send me an email. A few of you guys have been doing that. That video I mentioned earlier of the BBC documentary, that 3.5 one, I'll put it in the Facebook group. I'll put it on there as a comment on the post I did earlier with the link in for tonight's session, and you guys might want to check that out. Anyways, that's it for tonight.